Hi, good to see you all. So I've asked Greg to put up a PowerPoint, not so much for you, but I'm a bit tangential. And so we'll be finding Jimmy Hop.
And let's say hi to all of our people watching on Zoom. We do have a great group
For
of
those
people
Zoom
watching.
folks, I understand the microphone's here, so hopefully that helps.
All right. Well, hopefully it'll be better.
So we'll work on that. I really am excited to be here. It's nice to be out. I was a little embarrassed to say it took me about 10 minutes in the bathroom to remember how to tie my tie, and I had to YouTube it to figure it out. But I do have full winds are going for you all, so if that helps. And the other thing is, I'm going to apologize up front. As passionate as I am about crisis, I'm equally as passionate about reentry and justice things. But I know Norma's got all that covered, so I'm going to leave half of my spiel off. When I first told to Greg, he said, take your normal hour and a half and do it in 40 minutes. I'm like, no problem, Greg. And then he's like, well, we got some more people. Take your 40 minutes and do it in 20. I'm like, no problem, Greg. And he said, do your 20 in 11. I'm like, okay. So I'm going to channel my New Jersey Italian and talk as fast as I can, which is my normal baseline. But happy to be here. Thank you for getting that, everybody. That'll help. Now I got two hands. And I truly do believe that public health is part of public safety. And these are critical intersections. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about crisis, and I will try to jam this in real quickly. You can probably go to the next slide. And leave Norma to handle all the corrections and the reentry, but these are so intimately tied. So I want to tell you a little vignette, and I'll try to do it kind of quickly. As a retired Phoenix police officer, I worked at the fifth largest city in the country. I worked midnight shift for about 9 years in the inner city. My beat actually at the time was the smallest beat in the state, the quarter square mile. So it was a hopping little part of town. And right around 5 years in, I kind of had hit that jaded street cop stage, right? We all get in the job to help folks and everything, but you start dealing with things day over day. And I remember in 2001, Phoenix is one of those strange cities that actually started CIT, not in response to a bad incident, but a friend of mine was a lieutenant and somebody from the behavioral health system got together and tried to create it. And so I got to attend that first class. I was hand selected, one of 15 folks to go to it. And I went through it and I'm like, wow. And I still remember the NAMI in our own voice presentation and an individual who was in recovery from substance abuse, and obviously told that at the very end of their hour and a half presentation around substance abuse disorder. And it was shocking. And I still remember those two people to this day. And I'm like, wow, it kind of re-empathized me, right? I kind of, I'm still a cop, but I can see how this is going to interface. And I was kind of rejuvenated. And I learned how to do all those great verbal judo things and all this great stuff. And so then I'm like, all the resources, Arizona has the privilege of being under the longest behavioral health lawsuit in the nation. But one of the things it did is it pushed a lot of money. And so we actually had a fairly vibrant crisis system of a lot of resources. Learned about it all. And then I went out next Monday, 10 o'clock at night, I start my shift. And one of my regulars, Kathy, still remember the address, 327 North First Avenue. It's no longer there, so you can't figure out who Kathy was. But it was one of those small kind of SRO type of complexes where when you walked up the stairs, they were on a cant to get up there, right? And I would see Kathy a couple times a month. She obviously had a severe mental illness, but I wasn't sure of all the details. She was frequently would threaten suicide by taking 100 Tylenol, which doesn't seem like your normal way. But if you were to take 100 Tylenol, you're not coming back, right? And she would do some drinking and stuff. And she could be a little challenging at times. And I get out there and I'm CIT in the heck out of it. Right? I'm doing all my great CIT stuff. And holy cow, it works. And me and Kathy are engaging, and I don't have to threaten her with a petition. And we used to contract for safety back then, kind of luckily that's gone now, but right, I didn't have to do that. And we're talking, I'm like, Kathy, I'm going to get you some help. She's like, if you take me, I'll accept the help, which is not normally how this goes. Quite proud of myself. I run down to my patrol car, and we've got these crisis centers. Frankly, something even more robust than what you guys have, right? So remember the address of this place, 2627 East Thomas Road. It's bedded in my head because it was worthless. But so we get there, and I drop her off at the psychiatric crisis center. And what do you think they told me?
You won't take her.
Why?
Because
she's drinking. We're not going to take her. Wait a minute, we just heard 90% of the folks around, right? I'm like, no worries. I learned about this other great place. We got crisis detox. 2001, we got a crisis detox. I drive her down 2770 East Thomas Road, different provider doing it, now under different management. I get her there. What do you think they tell me? Why? She's suicidal. So, statute of limitations are up. I drive by potentially county hospital. May or may not have put the car in park. I don't know, right? But I'm sad to say, not sad, it's, I left her in the parking lot of County Hospital and wished her luck. And now all of a sudden you guys are all mad at me, but a second ago I was the hero, right? I was the good guy, right? And I'm like, wait, I'm not the bad guy. I went to this training. I'm willing to try it. I was told all these great things that were there, and I was lied to. And the reality is, I stopped doing CIT at that day. I got one day. Now, I still kind of spoke to folks a little bit differently, right? But diversion didn't matter because I knew I couldn't divert. So I still did police work the same way. I might have had a little bit more understanding and empathy, you know, but I didn't change the way I police. Can you click for me, buddy? Or I'm going to break everything and you know. So I stayed involved with the concept, right? Because I did a lot of homeless things. I actually helped create our first Housing First initiative, of which police were part of right there. But I said a couple of years later, our CIT program had atrophied. I agreed to take it over. And I said, I'll do the training, but here's the deal. I'm going to spend 90% of my time working with the behavioral health community. I'll do the training, but I'm going to reach out and work with the providers, the peer runs. We have some, that's actually where I met Greg through one that he was involved with, right? And start working there. And so this here's a great presentation that takes about an hour to go through, so I'm not going to get away with it. But your community has CIT. It's quite common now, a lot of places. I just had the most wonderful lunch, that neat little co-op with the most amazing sergeant that you guys are fortunate to have in Twin Falls. She's lovely, Dusty, and has done some great things over there, right? But CIT is so much more than training, and everybody talks about training, and it led to this concept of which training is one of them. I won't take the time to eat up where all these others, but community collaboration, this kind of stuff, meeting, going to lunch, talking, problem solving, joining as you're planning new resources, involving law enforcement and other stakeholders, detention, correction, as you're developing things, right? And then a vibrant, accessible crisis system. I had a very large, well-funded crisis system that was worthless to me from a police officer's perspective, right? And so that's where I started to get most of my passion. So from 2004 is where Phoenix and Maricopa started to really transform their crisis system. Next slide, I'm moving as quick as I can. And it led to my favorite slide. This is easily a 40-minute slide. I could spend all day on this slide and get up on the table. But what it basically said is, and this has other applicability other than first responders, but the reality is, even with 988, sorry, I'm supposed to stand over here, even with 988 coming and all these things of trying to, police are still, and first responders are still going to be out front of a lot of these things. And so we want to make sure that we're leveraging the opportunities that when first responders encounter things, they have the ability to connect to more positive therapeutic options other than just the justice system. And so this is where we landed. I came up with my remove the barrier. There's 3 elements. And I still remember when I did this in front of Louisiana State Director. I'm like, it's about customer service based upon the customer that you're dealing with. And there's multiple customers, right? There's the member that you're interfacing with. There's your funder. And then there's your key stakeholder, me, the collective me, right? And most of these were designed not at all thinking of what were the customer services need of first responders. And this was like this great illuminating light bulb of which seems so common sense. Right? It's like the little thing on top of the Starbucks coffee, right? So you don't spill. I mean, it's that obvious, right? You just put the little green thing, right? We don't spill. Why did that guy become a millionaire? Not me. But these were the things, right? So it was the no wrong door philosophy, right? If law enforcement's bringing, it's quite easy. The answer is yes. So if I bring you there and you were suicidal, the answer is
Yes.
If I bring you there and you were drinking, the answer is
Yes.
if I bring you there and you have, I'll clean it up a little bit, but if you're very disheveled and dirty, the answer is
Yes.
right. And so it doesn't matter if they're mental health, doesn't matter if it's substance, doesn't matter if they're on Medicaid, doesn't matter if they're not on Medicaid. Now, it certainly matters for long-term care and everything else, but it shouldn't matter in saying yes, right? Doesn't matter if they're too drunk, and sometimes folks are potentially too drunk, but then we can coordinate to another system rather than tying somebody up in a pretzel, putting them back in handcuffs in the back of a police car. To go there, let's at least get them to the more appropriate place and then allow the system to navigate there. My other favorite one, and I know they're looking at me, but I got to tell the story, it's so funny. So I had, we really have a gold standard crisis system in our group. So I get all these folks coming, and I'm doing my whole spiel, and I'm talking about how they take all the drugs. So like, Nick, the problem isn't, they'll take my 2 drunk guys. They won't take the folks that aren't drunk enough. Yeah, he's not drunk enough yet. And I look at him, I'm like, darn, that's easy, man. just gonna go to 7-Eleven, buy him a 40, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. Right now. I mean, how is that a problem? Come on, right? But these are the things that used to happen, right? It's gotta be quick. And when we're talking about mobile, the idea of mobile in a perfect world is it's quick, it's certain, you're not triaged, they always come. You get there quickly. Quickly is defined by your community, right? In an urban setting, it might be 15 minutes. In a frontier, it might be 2 hours, right? So it's regional. And then release police so that police can go back to being police, behavioral health can be behavioral health, and take this uniform out of the equation. Because we all talk about trauma-informed care, but gosh, I want that cop standing with him the whole time. Because people with mental illness are scary. But isn't that the exact opposite of what we say, right? And so get that out of it when it's safe to do so. There's always a time it's not safe. It's a different conversation, right? Next slide, I'm moving. And I got about 1.5 more minutes, which gets me to here. Like, this is where like my passion is, right? Peers are the workforce solution, right? They're the answer. And I'm nothing against clinicians. If anybody's a clinician, some of my best friends clinician, my significant others, psychologists, right? So I mean, I got all that. But I'll take a peer any day of the week, working with folks that are having challenging in crisis. I used to have folks that would go out and do homeless work with me and do follow-up that had 8, 10, 12, 14 years in DOC. And they'd be sitting in the front of my police car going out to do stuff, right? The power of peers. And don't forget or let anyone tell you that peers can't or shouldn't be part of crisis delivery. They can and they should, right? Increasing anxiety, shared experiences, right? You gotta do it right, you gotta do it appropriately, and they're not a replacement of clinical, they're a complement to clinical, right? And then they can do all the things I really want to talk about, but I'm not going to because it's enormous, about discharge planning and coordination of care. And we even got it where police officers can deal with the crisis and take this lovely gentleman to a crisis center, let's say, or maybe arrest him today, who knows, right? But whatever.
No, it's not my lucky day.
But then I can refer them for my peer to go do some proactive follow-up. Because the peer can go knock on the door now, have a conversation, what's your first name? Lance, have a conversation with them, offer to work to try to prevent the future crisis. So with that, I could go for another 5 hours, but I'm not allowed. Thank you all for putting up with me.